Hi, friends. Welcome back to our next and final interview as we continue through our reflections of 2020. This week, we're grateful to Roger and Donna Harms for coming in. This was, in some ways, the most difficult interview to schedule as we looked for someone in the congregation that would be a part of a group that had been kind of labeled vulnerable, and to hear what it's like to think that you might be especially in danger from COVID and especially mindful of some of the restrictions and maybe affected by some of the limitations. So it was really interesting to hear this perspective from people who both acknowledged that and yet tried to do some things in spite of that. And I think that some really interesting themes throughout this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an important interview, especially when you frame it in the sense that by definition, the folks that we know the least about their experience are the ones we haven't seen. And there is this whole segment of not only our congregation, but those within our community who have very much grappled with what it means to have been labeled this thing vulnerable, to have been told that, you know, in a group of people, you are at most risk of this virus. And the responses to that have been as individual as the people themselves. And, you know, I think what Roger and Donna do so graciously is they offer us a window into not only their own sort of choices and responses, but also some of that of their connections, of knowing that there are many different people navigating this season in different ways. And when you get an opportunity to hear it from their point of view, I think what it does is it helps all of us, regardless of what our experience or response has been, to recognize that there are those who've had a radically different experience than ourselves. And it is, I think, an unbelievable opportunity, really, to get to hear from those who we, quite frankly, haven't heard as much from as we are used to.
Yeah, I think there are some really kind of profound and deep moments woven in and out of this conversation, some stuff that I left really thinking about in regard to not only how we face those situations in which we make decisions about our health, but maybe in some ways, more importantly, the quality of our life and how it is that we navigate situations like we've been in and make the trade-offs to the things that bring us energy and to some extent bring us life with the things that maybe even curtail that or threaten that possibly. And so I think there was a lot to be said for this interview, and I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, ultimately, I think we can all be encouraged as we hear from Roger and Donna, really to turn our attention to the choices that we make at every stage of life. And as they reflect upon some of the significance of what happens when you lose time in their own stage of life, I think it is an invitation to all of us to recognize that time is indeed precious and that the choices that we make, regardless of where we find ourselves in life's journey, matter. And so thank you to them for sharing their time with us. Thank you to all of those who have participated in these interviews. I know that I've been blessed by the sharing of perspectives that we've heard and the empathy that we build for one another in that. So without further ado, here is this conversation that we had with Roger and Donna Harms.
Hi friends, welcome back to our interview series on Reflections of 2020. Today we're grateful Roger and Donna Harms are with us, well known in the congregation, no stranger to anyone at First Presbyterian Church. We're grateful to have them be with us and to have them share some of the experiences of the past year through their lens and through their experience. Guys, welcome and thanks for being a part of this.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to get started, tell us your recollection now nearly a year ago, in fact, maybe a year ago by the time that this airs, that the first kind of inklings you had that this was going to be something that was going to impact you, that was going to impact our area, that was going to mean some changes. You know, back then we all I think we were thinking short term or much shorter term than it ended up being. But what was your first experience with that? What were you thinking? And what do you remember that it changed for you first?
We were in Florida.
Okay.
And I guess we didn't really realize the full impact of it for a while. And then our friends that are down there with us got a call from their daughter, like the 1st of March, saying, "We want you to come home." And they did. They left early, and so we stayed a while, and then the beaches were closing down there, and you know, we kept hearing more things, but still in Florida it seemed kind of loose, you know. So, but we decided that we would come home. We came home about 3 weeks early, and then I got really nervous because we had 2 nights that we'd have to be in a motel. So that was scary, and of course it was all different then in the motels too. There was no breakfast anymore. They gave you a bag, you know, to take, and I think one of our bigger shocks was we'd grab something at McDonald's for our noon meal, and then we'd try to stay at someplace, go eat out at someplace nice in the evening. Well, they closed the restrooms even. You could order food at McDonald's, but you couldn't go in all the restrooms. And so that was a little tough when you're on the road and you can't stop at a restroom. The gas stations had them open, so that's where we would have to go. But you want to add to that, honey?
Well, going back to Florida, the first things were we still had tickets for spring training games and even a couple of concerts, which the spring training games we actually did get a rebate, but all of those things were closing down, so we thought, well, we'll go back to Spirit Lake because things there will be going, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the restaurants will be open and so forth. And of course, when we got back here, it was further disappointment because lots of the things that we were intending and planning to do through the summer were starting to be canceled. But that was early. But I mean, it would be one thing after another. No concerts. No
Summer theater.
Summer theater. Yeah, that was a big one for us, and it just you thought by fall it will be different.
Yeah.
And then fall comes, and then we're talking about not having school and those kinds of things. So, you know, it's more of a disappointment type of thing for us. I mean, we didn't lose a job. We didn't have children going to school that we had to worry about and how are they, you know, so, but it seemed like it was just a series of disappointments. One, you know, well, we'll look forward to this. No, that's now been canceled. So it kind of went that way all summer long.
That's really interesting on two fronts. First, the idea, I think, is different for most of us of navigating that initial phase somewhere else. I mean, I think a lot of us tend to think we were here, and your demographic has probably more people in it who were in Arizona and Texas and Florida during some of that and had to make some of those changes on the fly or even traveling home. And a lot of us, I think, that's not something I had thought about because it wasn't really our experience at all. And then the second thing is, I think you're exactly right, Roger, that the fact that we didn't know at the outset how long it would continue made it always feel like, oh, it's worse again, it's worse again. And by worse, I don't necessarily mean the thing itself, but the impact of the thing. And so it's going to be 2 weeks, no, it's going to be 4, no, it's going to be 6, it's going to be 3 months, and I don't think, to my recollection, nobody early was having those kind of conversations. I remember that when we got word shut down church for a while, they were talking 2 weeks, maybe 4, depending on what happened. And here we are 12 months later, still feeling some of the impact of it. I think your characterization of a string of disappointments probably resonates with a lot of people.
Well, then we had been, gone for 3 months, and of course the first thing you want to do when you get back is see your family. We'd had some of our family visit us in Florida, but so we got back, and of course Kielson Harbor, where my mom is, that was closed to visitors, and that was really hard. And I know later in the summer when we thought, well, maybe we can visit our family in Wisconsin. Our daughter-in-law said, "You stay put." And so, we still haven't seen our grandchildren and seen some of our sons just because they were down for other reasons. But again, the first time you see them and we're a huggy family, could not touch them, that was really hard. So it's been a long year for us.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that very thing, because I've heard over and over again, and in fact, I've got to confess to you, I've done it myself, where younger people say to some of their older loved ones, this is the way it's going to be, in a sense of, I think, trying to make it easier. I think the heart and intention is, we want you to be safe, and
yes.
So, for instance, with my grandmother, we did make the choice, even when some visits were allowed, that no, we need her to stay safe. And I'm interested on the receiving end of that, because I'm sure there is a sense that you're grateful that people love and that they care, but that's also got to be frustrating on some level. What is that like, to be on the receiving end of that kind of strange love?
Well, that was okay. You knew it was for your own good. But I just remember that the very words our one daughter-in-law said, "You stay put," and because we were going to go see them. We have a great-grandchild too, and so it's just it's hard, but grateful that they care that much, so.
And maybe related to that idea, as we progressed through the months, initially there was probably some sense of vulnerability and maybe anxiety for everyone. But then as we continued to see the statistics and learn more, and one of the things we learned is that essentially the older you were, in some ways the more vulnerable you were, and particularly for people on the other side of retirement. Was there a moment that felt true for you? So Michael and I have had this conversation. Neither of us have felt particularly vulnerable in this. Obviously no one wants to be sick, but when you look at the numbers, you think, I would really have to lose the statistical lottery to have something very bad happen. But that changes as you move up the age range. And so one of the reasons we hoped to talk to some folks in that demographic was talk to us about what it means to be labeled vulnerable. Did you feel vulnerable? Did you resent that? Did it seem true? What impact does that have to be in the quote unquote vulnerable group?
Well, I think when you're talking about the vulnerable group, we're more vulnerable because we have some other underlying conditions.
Okay, so it added to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're already battling something, most likely.
Yeah.
And then you realize, well, if I get this on top of that, what is my immune system, like? And am I going to be able to battle it successfully? So I think you get a little depressed at times, and I think you get a little worried, maybe scared.
Yeah.
And you don't maybe do the same things that you would do.
Right.
You don't go to, the softball games or something that, and you are more aware. If I go to this place, are people going to be wearing their mask or not? And if not, then I don't think I want to go. Those types of things. Go ahead, Donna.
Well, you have to make a lot of decisions, like you had the opportunity to have your groceries delivered to you, or you can order them and pick them up, and we had to make those decisions, and we decided that we just would try to be careful. We wanted to get our own groceries and try to go at a time when it wasn't busy. So we did continue to do that, and somewhere along the way, Roger did develop COVID, but we have no idea where, because we were very, very careful. And I know we didn't have anybody to our house, and we did visit some of our friends in Esterville in their garage, sitting way far away in their garage, and so we tried to be careful, but you still have to make some decisions. What are you actually feeling like you need to do? And we needed to get out. And when the weather was nice, we were so grateful for the walking trails, because we walked every day. The Y closed, we couldn't go to the Y. So we did. We walked and we stayed outside. But we were even very careful then. If we met somebody on the trail, we got clear over on our side, and so
in some ways, I think we were closer, Donna and I, because we only basically had each other. So we really looked forward to the walks that we would have. Sometimes we just rode around the area. We probably know every new house that's being built right now, and so forth.
Yeah.
So,
there's and some of this is personality driven, but the house begins to feel pretty small. I mean, just the ability to go for groceries, the ability to go for a drive, take a walk. I think lots of people found some footholds in those things, and some sanity in that being a part of their new routine, and took a little less, maybe took a little less focus off what we had lost, in that we could still do some other things that we wanted to do.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, and Roger started out, he has a pool group of 4, and they rotate, houses once a week, and he also has a cribbage group. And so they started out continuing to do that, wearing their masks and changing all their routine, no treats, no this, no that, but there was a point even when that got a little scary. So they stopped that even, and that was hard. And
we've had this conversation at some point in every one of these interviews. Not only did we experience something that produced stress, it took away some of the things we do to navigate stress.
Right.
And so you had that kind of double whammy happening, where we're losing our support groups, we're losing, Tuesday coffee and whatever it is that we did and enjoyed and we sort of used to navigate some of that. Not only did we have this thing over here with lots of anxiety in it, we couldn't do some of the things we normally do to mitigate that.
Very true.
I'm curious, when you survey your community, your friend group, the people that you associate with, would you say that there was largely a pretty similar response amongst the people that you know, that everybody sort of did mostly the same things, or was there significant differences of opinions about how to do things? And did you have to navigate with that with your own friends?
I would say more of our friends were even a little more cautious than we were. Wouldn't you say that, Roger?
Yes, but then more casual friends were eating out more, playing golf more, and so forth. So I think we saw both ends of that. Some people just didn't appear to be limited in any way, but our closest friends
the older they
were
got.
more cautious.
Yes. A lot of our friends are younger than us, probably by 10 years or so, and they were more casual about it. But the older people were very cautious, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
As you think back over that last year, all of us, clearly we all had some plans that were affected and some things that we had hoped to do. And you mentioned time with family. Were there other things that you look back on that you lost, that you really missed, or that you had hoped to do? As you look back, were there kind of major disappointments in the things you had to give up?
Well, we had a cruise planned toward the end of July. That, of course, was canceled. And I think, in a sense, when you get to be our age, there's a limited number of years left. And when you lose a whole year out of maybe 5, that's 20%. And you do feel disappointed that I didn't get to do these things. But in the whole realm of things, those are just experiences. They didn't affect our livelihood. It didn't affect, the ability to do things. But there were some major disappointments, yes.
That's really interesting, Roger. I think, and just by the way age work, I think the farther up the ladder one is, and I heard some of these conversations most explicitly, I think, in nursing home situations, care centers, that balance of being careful and not wanting to take risks with one's health versus what are the things worth giving up. So the people in the care centers, who many of them might have said, I would much rather have my chances with COVID than lose a year of visiting with my family. Now, unfortunately, we didn't know that was the choice anybody was making at the time, but it's an interesting idea that at one point in your life, that year doesn't look, it just looks like, this is a pain, we all have to deal with it. At another point, it begins to look like, is it worth the trade-off? And that's not something I had really considered. That's really an interesting thought.
My worst experience of the whole thing was my mother, 103, and I hadn't seen her, got back and couldn't see her where we live very close, 5 blocks from Kielsen, and I would see her probably every other day. I mean, I could just bop in and say hello or do what she needed or help her with this or just visit, and that was very difficult because it was so very difficult for her. And there was a time when we could visit outside, and that was nice, but she never really could, or still doesn't understand the whole thing completely. I mean, she knows she can't do this and she knows she can't do that, but she still would say, well, can't you, I've got coffee made, I've got the table set. And that's been just so difficult. And she has gone downhill mentally just immensely. I think before we left last year, yes, she was forgetful. Yes, she repeated herself, but pretty with it, but now it's really hard. Now they've gotten, in the last 2 weeks, we've gotten to visit again in the lobby for 30 minutes, and with all the gear on, and she she comes and to visit with us, but she doesn't keep her mask on. She won't keep her mask on. In the hallway, I think she does, but it's really hard. And she'll still say, well, can't you come in for coffee? So, and again, you talk about years left at 103, and none of her family can see her, and except for just a few minutes. So she hasn't seen her grandkid. Well, I guess in the wintertime there was a time when you could visit through, the windows and things, and they would talk to her. But it's just, of all the things that hurt, that was it, more than anything.
That's, again, a very interesting intersection, Donna, between, on one hand, people, your family, sort of speaking into you being careful, but then on the other hand, you doing that as well with your own mother. And then unfortunately the reality that at 103 you have probably zero interest in the ways in which the rest of us navigated losing that with Zoom calls and FaceTime. I mean, that's not a generation that is going to be particularly able and willing to integrate the technology that most of us used to kind of compensate. So yeah, it's interesting that you're having both ends of the spectrum at once. Roger, would you yes or no on your COVID experience? Is that something you want to stay away from, or does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter at all. Okay. I had a moderate case, I would say. It never got into my lungs and so forth. After I found out that I was positive, in the AM, they called me in that afternoon to get a cocktail of drugs by infusion, which was supposed to alleviate the danger of having to go to the hospital or death from the virus. So they said that I would probably feel better than I was. I didn't think that it made a big difference with the way I was feeling, but I never felt terrible. I think, I was running a fever. I had no appetite. I lost quite a lot of weight, feeling nauseous quite a bit, those kinds of things, but never in my lungs. So, of course, I'm somewhat of I'm a big worrier, I guess. And yes. I kept thinking, is this going to get worse? Is it going to go to my lungs? So every morning when you get up, do I have a sore throat? Do I have, a new malady? And luckily, I did not. But Donna relegated me to the downstairs, and that was being alone I would come up during the daytime, but during the night and so forth, when you wake up and you have these thoughts and not having anyone there to share them with, that's a little more difficult. I certainly feel sorry for people that are single that would get the disease. I think you feel that once you're done with COVID, that you're going to feel better all the time. But for me, there are some after effects.
That hasn't been the case.
My digestive system just does not work like it did before I had it. But again, those are mild, and so I can work through them. But I guess overall, I didn't ever feel like I was going to have to go to the hospital or something like that. So I know lots and lots of people that had a much worse case than I did.
I would assume any reasonable person, there must be some anxiety in this thing that we've been all trying not to catch, and then to find out, well, now I have it, and wondering what next. Even around here or at home, we laughed every time you cough or sneeze, or you think, oh, is this it? Now, is it finally here? And so I think it would be very natural to have some apprehension going to sleep each night thinking, okay, are we headed uphill or downhill? I can't imagine that wouldn't be how most people would react. Yeah.
And I've heard numerous times from people about the fact, if we're honest, all of us have had anxiety at some level throughout this whole time. Especially, I don't want to catch it. If I did catch it, even for a young person, there's still news stories of bad things happening. So you sort of have this anxiety. And then I've talked with people, when they get that positive test, it's another level of anxiety, that now it's here, what's it going to mean? And yet then there's still the anxiety on the other side of, is my loved one going to get it? What's the long-term effects going to be? And you've named all of these things, and I'm curious, did you guys have to build new habits or practices, or did you have to return to old practices? Where did you find help dealing with some of that worry, some of that fear, some of that anxiety? Did you find new tools? Did you have to dust off old ones? What did you find helpful to navigate all of those things?
I'm just going to answer one little part of that. Part of the anxiety also is that there's really no place to go. You say, if I get worse, do I go to the care center? Do I go to the hospital?
They didn't want you there unless
you didn't know where you could go that you could get answers. There wasn't anything to take. If you feel bad, take aspirin, that was it. I mean, you didn't get cough medicine. You didn't get the normal things that you might for a different kind of malady. And so that part was stressful. If I do get worse, what do I do?
I think any prognosis that includes the words, call us if you get worse, is by definition going to produce some anxiety in the one who is hoping you don't have to then make that call. So what did that look like navigating, not only that specifically, but in general, this idea of dealing with that stress? What worked for you guys?
Well, as the time, after 14 days or 10 days is that you're not supposed to be able to pass it on. You're supposed to be immune. Well, that was kind of an anxious time for me because, well, for both of us really. I hadn't gotten it, and that was really fortunate. But then the time after he's supposed to not pass it on, you still don't know how kind of to treat each other. I mean, even when he came upstairs and then we slept in our own bed together, he didn't want to kiss me, nor did I really want him to kiss me. And we even slept on, far sides of the bed. It was really a different experience, how is this safe now? Can we do this or can't we do this? So our comfort level with each other in that respect changed. We'd watch TV, he clear on one side of the sofa, me clear on the other side, and of course we washed our hands a lot and tried to be just as careful as we could with food and everything, but
food was a problem because what Donna could eat, I didn't feel comfortable eating, or she would make something and I would say, well, I really don't feel like eating.
I couldn't get him to eat. And that worried me because I could see him just, he's not very big to start with, and I think he lost maybe over 10 pounds, and I could see that going down, and so I tried to fix something that I thought would be good for him, and he couldn't eat it. Or then when he got a little better, he wouldn't eat anything that had any spice at all, and so it got so I cooked for him and cooked for me, and it was kind of a tense time.
Yeah. And you mentioned walking. Were there, and we talked a little bit about reading. Were there other practices that you all felt have been really important during, again, maybe that time, but just this time in general, that you've found helpful to just kind of offset the moments when we have been worried?
Yeah, well, he liked me. I had never read to him before because, well, we each had our own books, but when I read, of course, that had to do with his eye surgeries too. It wasn't really COVID related, but we found that quite a pleasurable thing. He liked hearing me read, and I thought some of his books weren't the ones I would choose, but we did do that. And then even maybe last week he said, would you read that? Would you read to me for a little bit because my eyes are tired? So you find new and different things that you like to do together, and we're pretty compatible. And you probably want to get to that later, but I think we found that yes, we miss our friends, of course, but we're just comfortable being with each other, really.
And you've been married how long?
35 years.
Yep, 35 years, yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
I think, right now, we really enjoy the Bible study things. We look forward to that coming on at 2:00. And at first, we missed not having the Bible study, the weekly one that we would have. But I think it's, we have not been in the chancel.
We haven't been here yet for church. But we certainly think that you have done a wonderful job in making the services on Sunday and the Bible studies accessible to us.
I think one of the things everybody has expressed is that they miss that point of connection. Yes. And so I think for a lot of people, just any kind of semblance of that has been helpful. Yeah. Donna, you mentioned a positive, so why don't we go that direction as you think through? One of the things we've tended to say is, very few things are all bad. So what as you look back has been upsides to this experience for you? What do you feel like when this is over, I'm going to take this with me, and maybe without this last stuff we've all been through, I wouldn't have known it, or I wouldn't have learned it.
Well, our spending time, when this is over, we'll still go back to doing things with our friends, but I think just our time together we really enjoy. And I think just the simple things, like we would walk the trails, then we'd have our coffee mugs along, and we'd go grab coffee through McDonald's, and then we'd just take a ride. Every day we did that, and I don't think we'll give that up. I think we'll spend more time just having our coffee together after class or something and going on our rides. I've enjoyed that. With my children, it's been kind of neat. You talk about the evils of texting, but instead of talking, but my kids have started this kind of group text, and it's been so interesting. I've got an early riser there, and 5:30 I'll hear my phone do something, and it'll be happy Monday, and then the rest of the family kind of just adds to it, and so we communicate with them a lot more by text than we do by telephone, because they're working and they're busy, but they manage to do that, and that's been kind of an upper for me. Crazy things they'll say or come up with, and I think we'll probably do more texting. We won't lose our talking to each other, but I think we'll communicate more on almost a daily basis. So that's been an upper. Yeah.
I think we appreciate our friends more also. I mean, we really miss them.
Yeah.
And you don't, sometimes you disagree with friends and so forth, and even argue about things. And I think I'll just appreciate them more as I get to see them more again.
It's well said.
I always baked cookies for his cribbage group and his pool group, and they always look forward to those cookies. And so I haven't baked as many cookies lately, and I kind of miss that. I still bake them, but now the guy that cleans our driveway, if I can catch him, he gets the cookies. And
he's the winner. He's the big winner.
He's the winner.
That's a pretty good prize. Yeah, that's great.
I think one other thing that I realize more how busy Donna is in doing household chores and things, because I'm just around more. She mentioned some of my activities, and especially if I would play golf. I mean, sometimes I would take 4 or 5 hours out of the day, and Donna would be baking or cleaning or something like that. Now that I'm at home more, I realize that I'm not doing my share of the work.
But he's helping me more without even asking him. He's up doing, not that he never did help, because he did, but he helps more now. And when I say something to him, I can do this, and he'll say, well, I have to have something to do.
As people who like reading and come to Bible studies and find the life of the mind important, have there been any lessons that you think you've learned in this season? Is there a tidbit that you think you'll carry with you from this season, either something maybe you've seen in the world or you've read that's been meaningful? What have you learned in this season?
I'd say be grateful for what you have. Through all of this, I mean, during our year, we've had 2 eye surgeries, we've had COVID, I've had a knee replacement, and it makes you just really grateful for what you have. And but despite all that, we are healthy for our age, and just grateful for every day, I think, more now.
Yeah, I think we realize that we do have a lot to be grateful for. Family, and we really don't have to worry except what we want to bring into our daily life, I guess. I mean, we have plenty to eat. We have a nice home. So I think we do feel more grateful for what we have right now.
That seems like a wonderful takeaway. That somehow losing some portions of life make us more grateful for the portions we could have perhaps been taking for granted. I think that's a great reflection. I think that's spiritual maturity. I think that's wisdom, and I think that's a very good insight for the rest of us.
I pray more. I know that. So.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're grateful that you'd come in and share part of your story with us. We're thankful for your time. We obviously miss having you here. It's good to have you back in the building. We look forward to hopefully more of that in the near future. But thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. We're grateful for both of you.
Thank you for asking us.
Yeah, we're grateful for you guys.